Well, it was a rough start to the game for AJ Smith-Shawver, but the bullpen kept them in the game. However, the season-long struggles for the offense continue as they couldn't do anything against the Padres pitching staff. And now the Braves season is on the line with Max Fried going to the mound in what could be his final time with the Atlanta Braves. We'll discuss all that on today's episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. And it might be getting time to move on to one of those other Atlanta sports teams if the Braves can't pull out a win on a Wednesday. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube if you're new. Hit that thumbs up button. Leave me a comment. And make sure you follow me on social media at Shortstop Ball and the podcast at LockedOn_Braves. And if you're listening to the audio version, please do me a favor. Leave me a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. I appreciate all the support that you give me here at Locked On Braves. Today's episode will recap game one of the wild card series, a 4-0 loss to the Padres, the pitching decision, the terrible offense. We'll get into all of that, but then we're quickly going to turn the page to game two, where the Braves season is on the line with Max Fried going to the mound. And again, what could be his final start as an Atlanta Brave? We'll touch on all of that on today's episode, which is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.com, yeah. The right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your baseball rivals. Book today on Booking.com, the official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball. Get the Booking.com app today. We all knew going into game one against the Padres was going to be an uphill battle. We weren't really sure who was going to start in that game. We found out it was AJ Smith-Shawver. It didn't go great for him, and we'll talk about that. But you knew game one was going to be tough. 4-0 loss, though. The Braves had a chance in this one, and we can talk about the pitching, and we will. But it's the same story all year long that cost the Braves in this game, and it's the offense. And again, you take out a Ronald Acuna Jr., you take out an Austin Riley, you take out, all the guys, the pieces that they've been missing this year. And this is what you're left with. And it's hard to watch. And Michael King is a really good pitcher and give him a lot of credit. But this was a typical 2024 performance from the offense and a typical 2024 type of game where even where you didn't get a great start, your offense couldn't overcome 4 runs. And we've said it all year long. 4 runs should not be insurmountable. It should not feel like when Fernando Tatis Jr. hits that 2-run home run in the bottom of the first, it should not feel like the game is over because we can't trust our offense to score 3 or 4 runs. But that's the case, and it's been the case all year, and it's why many fans have told me just get this season over with. I cannot watch this offense anymore. And I get that. I certainly feel that way. Now, I want the Braves to play as many games as possible. They're my team. I want to watch them as much as possible. But it's hard to watch this offense, and it's been hard to watch them all year long. Even, without the injuries, there is still enough talent in this lineup to be able to get it done. And what else is very much in 2024 fashion, the Braves out-hit the Padres in this game. They had 7 hits to the Padres who just had 5. But 2 of their hits left the yard, accounting for 3 of their 4 runs. The Braves couldn't find that long ball against Michael King, who doesn't give up a lot of them. Again, it's the same thing that we've seen all year long with this offense. You get good enough pitching, but the offense just cannot do enough to keep you in the game or give you a chance. And they had some opportunities early. I think that's the other frustrating part of this. You had a couple of runners on in the first and third innings, but couldn't score a run. You had a 2-out double from d'Arnaud in the 4th inning. So in 3 of the first 4 innings of this game, you had a runner in scoring position. And we all know that's been a big problem for the Braves this year. But, and I know I'm beating a dead horse here. I'm going to talk about not stealing bases, but in the first and third inning, you had Michael Harris on base. And if you send him and he's able to get a steal and all things work the same after that, and you can't always assume that in baseball, you would have scored at least 1 run in that situation because both times he was on base, somebody behind him got a hit. Once it was Olsen, once it was Ozuna. But because he's just standing at first, he's not going to score. It's the same thing I've been talking about all year long. You're facing a guy who has a 0.88 home run per nine in a ballpark that doesn't give up a lot of home runs unless you're throwing 94 down the middle like AJ Smith-Shawver did or hanging a slider like Luke Jackson did. You cannot count on that 2 or 3 run home run to get you back in the game. It's, again, I'm tired of saying it, and I know you're probably tired of hearing it, but you have to find other ways to manufacture runs. This offense is not good enough to string together 3 or 4 hits in an inning to score a single run. And they're not, obviously not taking any walks, 15 strikeouts, no walks in this game. It's really hard to score if you're not getting those home runs and you don't do anything else to try to score runs. And I get the counterpoints to that too. Certainly Michael Harris is not a great, stolen base guy. He has 9 stolen base in 15 attempts this year. That's not a great, he's got something he has to get better at. That has to be part of his game. He has to improve in that area. Because like I said, that potentially cost the Braves at least 1 run, if not 2 runs in those first 3 innings. You saw Ozzie still later in the game, and that's great. I thought that was even more of a dangerous situation to go. You're down 4 runs with 2 outs and Ozuna at the plate, and you still then, but you don't steal when you lead off the game. You don't steal when you get on with 1 out. I can't understand it. It's been a season-long frustration of mine. I'm sure many of you as well. I don't understand when you recognize the difficulties of this offense to score without the home run. You're facing a pitcher you're probably not going to get a lot of home runs off of, in a ballpark that you're not going to get a lot of home runs. In a game you have to have, like, if you're able to answer back in that first or third inning with a run or 2, I don't know if things wind up differently, but it at least puts you in the game. It maybe pushes up Michael King's pitch count a little bit more, but they have been so against trying anything all year long. And it's a frustrating point, and I get it. And look, this is my team. I love the Braves. I want them to keep playing, but I'm like many of you. I can't take this offense anymore. Either get the guys back healthy who are going to hit all of these home runs, or try something different, because what you've been doing for basically since the end of April has not worked, and you're still trying to do it that way. And it's just extremely frustrating to watch. And look, not taking anything away from Michael King, who was filthy. Again, if you didn't know who Michael King was, we previewed it on yesterday's episode. Try to prepare you for it. He's been one of the better pitchers in baseball since the end of April, about when the Braves season turned around in a bad way and they became a mediocre team, at the same time that Michael King all of a sudden became a stud pitcher. And look, you can watch those pitches. They were moving all over the place. He was really, really good. But there still was no adjustment. A second, third time through the lineup, you still saw guys that were just as confused their second and third time through as they were their first time through. Look, Travis d'Arnaud, who had a double in this game in a 7th inning at bat, he sits there and takes a fastball down the middle because I guess he's expecting that sweeper away. And it's like your third time through and you still can't pick up the pitches of this guy. And I'm not sitting here trying to tell you that's easy, but at the same time, these are professional hitters. You got to be able to make some sort of adjustment. And it just felt like there was no adjustments made from the Braves offense. I mean, he just remained completely dominant all the way through, 12 strikeouts. And it's just, this offense continues to hold this team back in a game where, and again, we'll get into the pitching here next, but a game where you had an opportunity. Your pitching, despite the start, kept you in this ball game, but your offense just could not do anything. And that's, again, the biggest frustration. We're obviously going to talk about it a lot in the offseason, what this offense looks like going forward. But we all knew that was going to be the biggest problem for this team going into the postseason. Let's talk about the pitching for a minute, though. AJ Smith-Shawver finds out at 2 p.m. Eastern that he's going to get the start in this game. It's an impossible situation for a 21-year-old. Again, not finding out, and look, he's on the plane. He has to know that he's at least a possibility and be prepared for that. But you find out last minute that you're going to be starting game 1 of the postseason for the Atlanta Braves. And he comes out and the velocity is down. It's 93, 94. I mentioned the pitch to Tatis that was, middle down at 94 miles per hour. That's what you're supposed to do with that pitch. My hope, when we previewed the series yesterday, when I talked about AJ Smith-Shawver, my hope was that he'd come out just throwing gas. You let him air it out, and he's 97, 98, maybe 99, and maybe he can, blow by hitters and work that slider off of it. He only threw that slider one time. Again, I thought that was his best secondary pitch. I know the changeup looked good back in spring training, looked like a pitch that was coming along, but when he was coming up originally, it was that fastball slider combination. He only threw one of those in this start, but he didn't have that high velocity, at least not early on. He started to tick things up later in the outing. And this Padres team doesn't strike out a lot. We talked about that in the preview episode. They're not going to chase. You're not going to get a lot of swing and miss. You're not going to get a lot of chase from this Padres team. You have to be able to throw your secondaries in the zone for strikes. And you have to be able to set that up by being able to throw your fastball where you want to and to be able to have that good velocity that he has. Otherwise, it's just a flat fastball. And so, look, ended up not being an ideal start for A.J. Smith-Shawver. The options weren't great. And let's point that out. And let's be honest here. You were talking about starting a 21-year-old who has big issues with giving up home runs. We talked about that yesterday, and we saw it come to fruition in the first inning. You're talking about starting a guy in Ian Anderson who hasn't pitched in the big league since 2022. And look, he was my choice. That's who I thought the Braves should go to. That's who I thought the Braves should go to weeks ago. Now, Grant Holmes has been good, and I think that proved to be the right choice. But Ian Anderson, as much as that's who I wanted, I don't feel great about it. It's just that he has the postseason pedigree, and we've seen him do it before. And the other option was Bryce Elder, and I think we've all kind of been down that road. And look, I like Bryce Elder. I think he's a great depth piece in a rotation. But I wouldn't have a lot of confidence in that, even though he's thrown the ball well at Gwinnett here lately. But those are your options. And there's just not – they weren't great to begin with. And again, pitching was not the issue in the end because the bullpen did a fantastic job. Aaron Bummer was excellent in this one. Jesse Chavez threw a couple of scoreless innings. Even Luke Jackson looked pretty good other than the hanging slider for the home run that he gave up. But the pitching was not the issue here. It all came down to the offense, and that's just been the story all year long. I did want to read a quote, though, from Brian Snitker. This is coming from Mark Bowman, who posted this. But Snitker said on why they didn't go with Anderson, just the fact that Ian hasn't pitched in the big leagues in a year and a half. It's actually been 2 years. He's continuing to throw in Gwinnett and can still be an option down the road, but I think it's more that he is in his rehab year is the biggest thing. I don't buy that, and I'll be honest, I don't know that these decisions necessarily come from Brian Snitker, for being completely honest. We've talked about it before. If you were to bring up Ian Anderson, you burn an option on him, and then that really messes you up for next year where you're probably going to want to use that option. So I think that's probably more of the reasoning for Ian Anderson, along with the fact that he hasn't pitched in the big leagues in 2 years. Again, none of the options were great, but the pitching wasn't the issue in this one. The pitching was, once again, the offense and its inability to do anything. And so, again, we can talk about, who should have started. Again, in hindsight, maybe you just go with a bullpen game and you start either Aaron Bummer or Dylan Lee and see if you can piece things together. But look, Chris Sale could have pitched this game, and the Braves very well still could have lost because they couldn't score a single run. So again, we can debate game one starter, who should have pitched. Man, we're upset Chris Sale's not here. If you can't score a run, you can't win the game. And the Braves offense could not score a run. Now, hopefully that's not going to be the case in game two, which is where we're going to pivot to next with Max Fried on the mound going up against Joe Musgrove. We'll preview that game next. This episode of Locked On Braves is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. You got postseason happening right now. If you want to get out to San Diego to watch maybe the final 2 games of this series, you better do so quick. Or if you're just a big baseball fan and you want to travel to some of the other postseason games and cities, you can do so using the Booking.com app or Booking.com. With hotels, bed and breakfast, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com. You might just find your perfect stay, even in your baseball rivals city. You're feeling pretty good about a Braves comeback in this series. You want to catch them in the next series in LA. You can make that trip, make those plans through Booking.com. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your rivals. Book today on Booking.com or in the Booking.com app. Thank you for making Locked On Braves your first listen of the day. Go check out Locked On MLB for your second listen. We're solely will be catching you up on everything happening around Major League Baseball in the postseason, which we'll do as well a little bit later on this episode. But you can check out Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. As far as what's happening here the rest of the week, we will have another postcast after Wednesday night's game, and then I'll be back with you on Thursday recapping, hopefully, a Braves victory. We'll see if we have time for a mailbag this week. We might stick one in, again, depending on what happens in these next couple of games. Braves season is on the line. It's win or go home. It's a 3-game series. You don't have a lot of time. You don't have a lot of wiggle room. So losing game 1, obviously not key. And I heard somebody talking about all of these wild card series, and not many of them have gone to a game 3. So a lot of these are 2 and done. Braves are hoping that's not the case. And look, you knew coming in as a Braves fan, if you were going to win this series, it was likely going to be games 2 and 3. Not that anybody was conceding game 1, but you knew that was going to be a tough one for the Atlanta Braves. So this was the most likely outcome for the Braves if they were going to win, was to get a great start from Max Fried and Ronaldo Lopez in games 2 and 3 and hope that your offense can punch through and get something going. Now, we touched on Joe Musgrove a little bit yesterday, but I'm going to run through it again. 6-5 on the year, a 3.88 ERA, 4.34 expected ERA. 1.17 whip, though, was really good. 101 strikeouts in 99 2/3 innings in 19 games started. He did miss some time this year for an injury. It was a little slow coming back, but then he picked things up in the second half. 24.6% strikeout rate, just a 5.6% walk rate. So if the Braves didn't walk in game 1 of this series against a guy in Michael King who had a walk rate over 8, which is not terrible, I don't think they're going to be walking against Joe Musgrove and his 5.6% walk rate. But hopefully the strikeouts won't be as high, and his home run per 9 is up a little bit higher, 1.26 home run per 9, which again, not terrible, but certainly, not as good as what we saw with Michael King, who had at 0.88. His 4-seam fastball is at 93 miles per hour. He also has a curve, cutter, sweeper, and occasionally mix in a changeup to lefties and a sinker to righties. But his curve and sweeper and his changeup all have whiff rates over 32%. So plenty of swing and miss stuff for Joe Musgrove. If you're going to get to him, you really need to try to pin yourself in, sit on that 4-seam fastball. Batters are slugging .494 against his 4-seamer this year, but they're hitting .203 or less on his sweeper in his curves. So try to get yourselves in fastball counts. Hopefully get a fastball and a fastball count, and do not miss it. Again, I hate to be pessimistic, but that's something this offense has done all year. They've missed fastballs, middle fastballs. It does not matter. But again, that is the strategy for getting to Joe Musgrove. Try to get yourself in a fastball count, sit on it, and do not miss it when he throws it over the plate, because he's got some good swing and miss pitches that he can finish you off with. And he finished the season really strong. 2.51 ERA, 0.94 whip in 5 September starts. In 6 of his last 7 outings, he went at least 6 innings. And in 4 of those outings, he didn't allow a single run. So again, he has been hot here in the second half. He's got some good postseason experience as well back in 2022 with the Padres when he started 3 games and gave up just had a 2.89 ERA over 18 2/3 innings. So that's what the Braves are facing. It's another difficult matchup. It's a little bit more favorable matchup than what you saw with Michael King. So hopefully the Braves can get something going against Joe Musgrove. But again, he's been on a great run to end his regular season. But I think the story for this game a lot, obviously, will be focused on the offense. But Max Fried takes the mound for the Atlanta Braves. Is this going to be his last start in an Atlanta Braves uniform? A free agent after the season. I've always kind of thought he's not coming back. I know a lot of people kind of feel that way. This could be his last start. Hopefully not. Hopefully he goes out and dominates. He is certainly a guy that I want on the mound with my season on the line. If you can't have Chris Sale, certainly Max Fried would be my next choice. Maybe Spencer Strider if he were available. But that's not the case. And you can't really worry about what's not available. And it is Max Fried. And again, he is a great starter, a great candidate to have when you have a win or go home situation, as the Braves do. He finished the season with a 3.25 ERA, which was 5th best in the National League. May not feel like that if you're a Braves fan and kind of saw some of the struggles of Max Fried this year at the beginning of the season and then after the All-Star break. But he had a 3.25 ERA this year, and it's just he continues to get it done each and every season. In his last start, he was 1 out away from his 2nd complete game shutout of the year. Just a fantastic start from him. Really efficient too. Now, he did face the Padres back in May, 4 1/3 innings pitched. He gave up 9 hits and 3 walks. He did limit it to just 3 earned runs with only 2 strikeouts. But it's been noted the Padres offense has been much worse against lefties, 19th in OPS this year against southpaws. You saw Aaron Bummer, what he was able to do to that lineup. So hopefully that will work in Max Fried's favor. And one thing that I like about this matchup for Max Fried is that the Padres don't strike out a lot. They're going to put the ball in play, and Max Fried can deal with that. Max Fried wants you to put the ball in play. When he's at his best, he's getting that weak contact. Now, with that, it can lead to some starts like he had against the Padres back in May, where he gives up 9 hits. And I didn't go back and look, but I would imagine many of those were probably some weak hits. And sometimes that can happen to a pitch to contact pitcher, even one as good as Max Fried, where you're giving up that contact, and sometimes you just get some tough batted ball luck. And if that's the case for Max Fried, not much you can really do. But I do like the matchup because, again, you're not going to get those swings and misses. You're not going to get those chases. You're going to have to rely on movement within the zone, and Max Fried is one of the best at doing that. So if he can get some luck behind him, if he can get some good defense behind him, I think this is a good matchup for Max Fried and the Braves. Fried kind of similar to King. They both have similar profiles. Obviously, Michael King a little bit more dominant with that sinker that he has and that sweeper, but both of those guys are 95th percentile in average exit velocity against, and are kings at getting that weak contact. And Max Fried's home run per 9 is actually lower than King's at 0.67. So Max Fried does a great job keeping the ball in the ballpark. If he can limit the walks and get some good batted ball luck behind him and some good defense, I really do like this matchup for Max Fried. And the Braves need him to step up here. Again, as we've talked about all year long, the margin of error for this pitching staff is so razor thin. You just cannot give up much. So you're going to need maximum Fried in this one. You're going to need him to go 6-7 innings of 2 earned or less. That's what you're hoping for with Max Fried on Wednesday night. And then you just got to hope your offense can give you something, anything to help you win this ball game on a Wednesday night and even up this series and give you a chance in Game 3. So let me know your thoughts. What do you think about this Game 2 matchup? What do you think about Max Fried and his future? Yeah, the Braves don't advance. Is this his last start in a Braves uniform? And what type of confidence do you have in this offense going up against Joe Musgrove? Let me know all those in the comments section below. Next, we'll kind of turn our attention to what's happening around the rest of the postseason. Also got some interesting news items, give you an update on the Chris Sale situation, and a pretty interesting quote from Eddie Perez on what he told Marcell Ozuna. We'll discuss that here next. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live, play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's at FanDuel.com. And if you go over there now and look at the World Series odds, this was going into the postseason on Tuesday. Dodgers at plus 350, Yankees at plus 400, Phillies at plus 410, and the Padres had the 5th best odds going in at plus 950, while the Braves had the 3rd lowest odds at plus 2300 behind the Royals and Tigers, who both won Game 1 of their series. But again, you can check all that out at FanDuel.com. Also, make sure you visit FanDuel.com/playsafe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way you play. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 10 million active members. Had to update my read there, as now there are over 10 million active members on PrizePicks, which is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. And you can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000, and PrizePicks is available in more than 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, and Georgia. You can go out there, check out the app today, see what they got for Max Fried, pitcher fantasy score, pick more or less on that, and it's really just that simple. So download the PrizePicks app today. Use code LOCKEDONMLB and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to get the bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, let's talk quickly about what happened around Major League Baseball and the rest of the postseason matchups. Then we'll get into some news items on Chris Sale and Marcell Ozuna. Tigers had their Cy Young ready to go in game one, and he threw an absolute gem as the Tigers took down the Astros 3-1. A very interesting ending to that game. Jason Hayward came up with the bases loaded, 2 outs, and a 3-1 game. He had a rocket, a bullet right to Spencer Torkelson at first base to end the game as the Tigers get a huge upset on the road in game one. And then the Royals win another pitcher's duel, 1-0. Cole Reagans outdueled Corbin Burns in that one. Royals scored their lone run. How'd they get it? Stolen base by Michael Garcia led to a hit from Bobby Garcia that drove him in, and the Royals get the 1-0 win as they also get a big upset in their game one matchup. And then the Mets scored 5 runs in the 5th inning. Mets putting up some big crooked numbers here lately, late in games, as they took down the Brewers 8-4, who had jumped out to a 2-0 lead. Mets responded with 3 runs in the top of the 2nd, and then the Brewers scored 3 more in the bottom of the 4th, and then the Mets scored 2 more in the bottom of the 4th, and the Mets responded with 5 in the 5th, and then it was zeros the rest of the way as the Mets won game one of that series. Let's talk about the Chris Sale situation a little bit, because I know a lot of people still confused, whatever term you want to use for what has happened with Chris Sale. So let's go back to the very beginning. Sale says this is something he's dealt with on and off all year, but he's been able to pitch through it. So that's the first thing to note, is that these back issues are something that he's been dealing with all year, but he's been able to pitch through it. I guess in the start in Cincinnati, he felt something maybe a little bit more than what he's been feeling all year, but he pitched through it in that game, went on to go 5 innings. It wasn't his best start, and velocity was down, and we all could kind of see in that start that something just wasn't quite right. Then the Braves decided not to pitch him on regular rest to start that Mets series. And that was all of our first indication of, okay, what's going on here? Because doing that would have allowed you to pitch Chris Sale in that game and then the final game of the season if you needed to. Now, it all kind of, worked out where they had him lined up if they needed to. But that was kind of another indication to us as fans is, okay, something is not right. He was ready to pitch that Wednesday game. By all accounts, he was ready to go in that Wednesday game had it not got rained out. And then they decided not to start him on that Friday in the Royals series. Instead, they said, we're going to save him for when the Braves face elimination, which was a little odd at the time, because by not starting him on that Friday, you essentially eliminated him for the wild card round, assuming that he had to pitch. And so that was kind of clue number 2, that, okay, something is not right here. And then 40 minutes before their elimination game, the game that they saved Chris Sale for, he gets scratched. And look, I know the Braves don't share a lot of information, and they're very open a lot of times about what's going on in the moment. Afterwards, when it's done, yeah, they'll talk about it. But Matt Olson said he didn't know Sale wasn't starting until he saw Grant Holmes warming up on the bullpen monitor. So apparently a lot of players were oblivious to just the Chris Sale injury and the severity of it. And look, he woke up on, I believe it was Sunday, that he woke up and he was getting warmed up to pitch potentially on Monday, and he felt it a little bit more. I forgot to throw that in there. So on that Sunday, he did feel it a little bit more. AA says during that doubleheader that Chris Sale's day-to-day, maybe he can pitch in the wild card series, maybe he won't. But then we find out he stayed back in Atlanta. He's not on the postseason roster, so he's not going to be pitching in the wild card series. But there's a hope that he could pitch if the Braves advance. And where have we heard that before? I mean, it's just it's quite annoying. And I don't know what else the Braves can do about it. Look, they tried this year. They gave guys extra rest. They went with a 6-man rotation. I feel like they did everything they could to try to keep the rotation as healthy as possible once they got to the postseason. Now, it got to the point where they needed all their guys going down the stretch because they needed every single win just to get in. But I felt like they tried this year to keep their starters healthy, but it's at least the 3rd year in a row. And I know some people were saying it goes all the way back to 2019. My memory is not that great. But I know at least the last 3 years, the Braves have had to deal with one of their starters going down as you're getting into the postseason. Like, it's one thing if Spencer Strider gets injured at the beginning of the year, he's out for the season. You know that going in. But it's 3 years in a row now where the Braves have had at least one starter get banged up, sick, whatever, going into the postseason. Like, why does this keep happening? Is it just unfortunate timing? And again, I think that is the case. I don't think there's much else that you can do about it, but it's just, it's quite annoying is all I can say. That 3 years in a row, we've had to deal with one of our best starters getting hurt at the absolute worst time. And like I said earlier, Chris Sale could have pitched in the game on Tuesday, and the Braves very well still could have lost because they didn't score a run. But it is quite annoying. And again, now you're in a postseason and you don't have Strider, who again has been out all season. You don't have Chris Sale. You still got Max Fried or Ronaldo Lopez. Look, many teams would be completely dead in the water, losing a Strider and a Sale, not having those two guys. But the Braves still have a chance because of how deep the rotation is. Again, it's just annoying as a fan. This is 3 years in a row that we've had to talk about this, and I don't know what else the Braves can do. And then finally, this was also a quote that I saw Mark Bowman post. And I think this is in relation to Ozuna's kind of struggles the last week. It looked like he was selling out for the home run, trying to get that 40th home run. And so apparently Eddie Perez had to have kind of a heart-to-heart with him. And this is what the quote was that Mark Bowman posted. I told him, and this is what Eddie Perez said in that quote from Mark Bowman, I told him when he does good, then we're going to do good. So think about the team. That's what he's been doing the whole year. I was kind of mad about the way he was swinging. I'm glad I said something because he cares so much. First of all, that's great leadership from Eddie Perez, but it kind of gives you a little bit of indication maybe why Marcell Ozuna wasn't as good the last week. Look, when you're trying to hit home runs, and I think any hitter will tell you this, when you're trying to hit home runs, you're not going to. And it feels like that's what Marcell Ozuna, it sounds like maybe that's what Marcell Ozuna was doing that kind of maybe led to his cold streak. He had hit in this one. Look, the top of the lineup got on base in this game. Like I said, the Braves had 7 hits. Michael Harris had 2. Ozzie had a hit. Ozuna, Olsen had a hit. Soler had a hit. Your top of the lineup, got some hits in this one. It's hard when you're having to string 3 to 4 hits together an inning against really good pitching to score 1 run. And you're waiting on that 2-run, 3-run homer that's just not coming against that type of pitcher in that type of ballpark. It's frustrating. Again, go back and listen to segment 1 if you want to hear me rant about that again. But the Braves do have a chance in game 2. Max Fried on the mound. Will it be his last start? Can the offense deliver? That's what we're hoping to see on Wednesday night in game 2 of this series. Will the Braves keep their season alive? Thank you so much for making this your first listen of the day. Go check out Locked On MLB for your second listen. Listen to the Braves and the Padres on SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search Braves. Make sure that you follow us on social media at shortstopball, at LockedOn_Braves. Thank you so much to Clemson Tiger, Neil White, Eric Draven, Jeff Barry, Jay Is, Indo Midas King in here as well. Thank you all, Anthony Hood. I appreciate the great conversation, all you joining me here live today. Hopefully we'll be back tomorrow talking about a Braves win. So make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast, and we will talk to you next time.